Well, I think it's the first time that this has really happened in this country. It has happened in America. If you remember Matt Drudge, who was the leading blogger in the States, he revealed the Monica Lewinsky story. So we're a few years behind the States in the influence that blogs have got on the mainstream media, but it is beginning to happen. It's not just the Prescott one. If you remember a few weeks ago, Cherie Blair got into trouble over signing the Hutton report. Well, the mainstream media ignored that story, first of all. It was tucked away in the Mail on Sunday, and I expected the Monday papers to follow it up, but none of them did. So I put on my blog, look guys, this is a huge story, why aren't you doing something about it? And several political editors have told me subsequently that if I hadn't done that, they wouldn't have covered it, and it then dominated the news agenda for the next 3 days.
I mean, obviously, you're a Conservative supporter, so those two stories wouldn't trouble you in terms of your positioning. Does this worry you at all as a Labour supporter, that the phenomenon which you are now very much involved with has actually brought stories up which have been problematic for Labour and might have not surfaced in any way like the way they have over recent days?
It's just a medium. What affects us affects others as well. Obviously, we're in a position where Labour's in government, and therefore it's the target. The media's there to bring down the establishment, and when the Tories are in power, then the media will be there to bring it down, that establishment. But at the moment, you've got all sorts of stories coming up everywhere. There are more stories than you've got readers, almost. And so even with a massive number of writers writing blogs, political editors have still got to try and find the stories within that, and there are Tory stories out there as well as Labour stories. Yeah,
well, I'm sure. Would you cover Tory stories with the same relish, out of interest?
It depends who they were about.
Dave Davis, for example.
Good answer.
I mean, I make no secret that I'm a Conservative, and people read my blog and they form their judgments on what I write based on that. I've been critical of the Conservative Party. I'm not there to just promulgate Conservative propaganda. I give my views, and if people don't like them, there are plenty of other blogs for them to look at.
What about the fundamental sort of moral debate about the Prescott case, that the allegations in terms of affairs and things have just been that, rumours. No one has had evidence. And I was speaking to one of your fellow bloggers the other day, also a Tory supporter, who had some worries about it, pointing out that there were rumours about Tory politicians in the 1980s and 90s, and no mainstream newspaper went near them. And he was worried that in the current culture, that stuff would have got out, even if it was not based on anything other than rumour.
Well, I think responsible bloggers will behave like responsible journalists. They will sift the information that they get and report what they believe to be true. We have to remember that
without necessarily the evidence always, though.
Well, there are all of these comments by mainstream journalists about substantiated evidence. Well, I'm assuming that there is some substantiated evidence for the blogs that have named the person involved, supposedly involved with John Prescott. I haven't named the person. I have linked to the story, but I haven't actually named them. Now, if you say something libellous on this programme, Steve, you've got GMTV to pay your libel bills. If I say something libellous on my blog, I'm responsible for paying my libel bills, and that means that there is actually an onus, more of an onus on bloggers to get it right, to not post unsubstantiated rumours, because you can sue a blogger just as you can sue anyone else.
Yeah, so I don't think that's wholly true, in that I don't think all the rumours that we see on the web are by any means substantiated.
No, not all of them.
It's much more of a free market, and some people like to stir things up. Some people try to get closer to the line than others.
Yeah, but it is interesting that you could all be theoretically sued.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
in that sense, the constraint that has always shaped newspaper reporting and indeed broadcasting does apply to all of you as well, which is an interesting element to it. Are we at the centre of an extraordinary new phenomenon here, of which the Prescott affair has brought it to the surface? That, you know, people used to wait every day for the newspaper columnists, they read them, then they put the newspaper down. Ask this somewhat nervously as someone who writes columns for newspapers, is that very quickly becoming dated? And it's people like the two of you who are at the forefront of where things are going? Or am I being a bit too...
I don't think blogs are going to replace newspapers, but I do think newspapers are going to have to look very carefully about what is their new media offering. And if you look at The Guardian and their Comment is Free website, they've gone much further than any other mainstream media outlet in really looking at how they can engage with the public in a much more immediate sense. And it's our immediacy and it's our dialogue that makes us different.
Do you make enough money out of it, to be crude about it? Because this is, I have to ask it, because this is clearly essential, isn't it? If it is going to be big and it's going to be the next big media thing, you guys have got to make money out of it.
That is the real challenge, in that, I mean, I started my blog in its current format in December. I didn't expect it to take off in the way that it has. I mean, I'm getting, this month, I probably have about 200,000 people looking at it. Now, I haven't worked out how I can make money out of it at the moment. I make nothing from it. The only money I make directly from it are coming on programmes like this, I guess, with a sort of very small appearance fee. But I would love...
I'll negotiate on your behalf afterwards on that one. No, I won't. And that statement, you're not making money out of Labour Home?
Well, like I said, 2 blogs. Labour Home has been going for 2 weeks and has been getting 4,500 hits a day. Yeah. My older blog, the gossip blog, Recess Monkey, it gets 150-odd thousand hits a month. Yeah. These are eyeballs in the political arena. But, yeah, I'd love to make money out of it, but not because I want to get rich. I'd love to be able to afford to just do the blogging.
I mean, to make a living out of it, basically.
Absolutely. I think we are providing a service.
I think the interesting thing, Steve, is that 6 months ago, I think you were very sceptical about the future of blogs, and a lot of your colleagues were, and sort of rather saw people like Alex and I sort of sitting in our anoraks in our bedrooms, typing away because we had nothing better to do with our lives. I think that image has started to disappear now, and you find that a lot of mainstream journalists have now started their own blogs, but some of them don't quite get it, because you do have to not only write something every day on the blog, you have to interact with the people that post comments on the blog too. And you find that with particular journalists, they write their pieces and that's the end of it. They don't want to hear what anybody else has got to say.
But Iain, regardless of how professional we try to be, and I certainly do try to be professional about it, there is this obsession that creeps in. If you've got 6 hits a day, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what can I write that will keep those 6 people coming back tomorrow?
I've never been in that position.
And then when you get to 2,500, 3,500, 4,000 hits a day, it's just a beast that is growing and growing and growing, and you just have to keep feeding.
That's what I wanted to finally explore with you. The theme really has been whether the blogs are taking over media culture. I'm just finally fascinated whether your own blogs start to take over your life. I mean, I was reading yours the other day, and I think, was it pre the Prescott thing, or it hadn't reached its height? And I think you were waiting to do a newspaper review, and you wrote a blog about ways to do the newspapers. And do you almost think whatever you do now, better... do I blog this, better get going on this one? Rather like people write diaries and the diaries almost become a raison d'etre.
It is a diary, and part of the reason I think people come back to my blog is that I'm not just talking about politics. I am talking about partly my life, my views. I mean, I write about football quite a lot. I write about my awful taste in music. There's a lot of humour on it, and people like that. So if something vaguely amusing happens and I've got my BlackBerry with me, yes, sometimes I do just sort of bash out a couple of lines and put it on. I don't think I'm obsessed by it. It doesn't actually take as long as people think. I mean, I probably spend an hour and a half a day on it. It is not a full-time occupation for me. I mean, it might become so. If I thought I could make a living out of it, I might do it. But I think in America, the only way people have made a living is to become part of a bigger media organisation. Andrew Sullivan, for example, has now become part of Time magazine. I don't really see that happening here, and it sort of slightly goes against the ethos of blogging, because you do need to be independent.
Although Hillary Clinton's just hired a blogger.
She has.
To blog on her behalf.
Yep.
Under her name?
No, I think they blog under their own name, but they're the cheerleader for Hillary Clinton.
Well, she's hired someone to harness the blogosphere in America for her presidential campaign. So and interestingly, David Cameron has just hired someone from Google to not just to look at blogging, but to look at how the Conservative Party harnesses the internet in general. And
David Miliband's got one, hasn't he? I think you've had some fun with the Miliband.
It is so boring, and the taxpayer is paying for it. £8,000 it cost to set up. Our sites were free.
My site certainly isn't free. It's cost me a lot of money.
Well, mine is.
A certain amount of money.